Test, test. I was going to tap on here and make a noise, but it's not making a noise. So. The June 8th, 2021 Finance Committee meeting of the Carlington School District Board of Directors is called to order. Mrs. Herman, would you mind leading us in the pledge tonight? Will the secretary please call the roll?
Director Apple?
Here.
Director Frank?
Here.
Director Honchar?
Here.
Director Pushkar? Here. Director O'Brien? Here. Director Mendoza?
I don't believe she'll be able to be here
Director
this evening.
Zaletsky? Here. Director Simcik? Here. Director Shriver?
Here. I'll report that we will have an executive session after this meeting where we will discuss negotiations, contract matters, and other personnel and real estate matters. Thank you, Solicitor. I'll turn to Dr. Kreider for the Finance Committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Shriver. Tonight for the Finance Committee meeting, we have Mr. Bilby to give us a presentation on status of the budget as far as we're moving forward and looking towards the final budget coming onto the board agenda for our next June 22nd board meeting. Mr. Bilby.
Thank you, Dr. Kreider. Josh, you hear me all right? Make sure I turned it on this time. Okay, good. All right. Good evening, everyone. Tonight, we're going to be discussing several topics that are very integral in the part of building our budget and continuing of the budget. First, what I'm going to do is give you a quick update as to where we are as of today, or actually as of yesterday with the current budget. And then what we're going to do is we're going to look into several scenarios that I built that takes a look at the 5-year projection of, where we possibly could be, hence, how we take our look at how we want to handle, raising of taxes, looking at expenditures, all that. And we'll get to that in a minute. And then finally, I'm going to take a look at our capital projects plan, and we're going to briefly go into the ESSERS grant. So basically what my hope is tonight is that when we're done with this, you're going to have a better understanding of, where, I come up with my decision to go to you to say, hey, we need to either raise taxes or don't. And most importantly is, what is it going to take to keep Carlington, giving that top-notch educational program that is safe and sustainable, because that's really what we're here for. And we have to look at the sustainability of the district, because if you live in today, not worry about tomorrow will catch up to you quickly, and you'll see as we go through the scenarios. So a lot of my job is to not worry about today, but to look into the future so that I can give you all a good idea of where we need to be, how we need to position ourselves. And that's how we have for there. I did put a packet in front of you that has some of the scenarios and has a PowerPoint in there. I think it's important that you have those, that you can take a look at them, and it's a lot of information and it's hard to see sometimes on the screen. So I'll reference those when we get to those parts. So let's go ahead and begin. All right, so we're looking at the current financials as of yesterday. The revenues are continuing to come in strong. The biggest concern right now that I have is we're not going to make our budget based on our earnings from investments, which we all know how the investments have gone and the rate. So, and also of our retirement subsidies. The biggest issue with the retirement subsidies was based on the budgeting. When you make a budget, you're projecting where you think the budget's going to be as far as with the salaries and everything. And as you know, the retirement subsidy does come based on our salary costs. So our costs are down this year in salary. So we're not going to quite hit the mark that is stated on the budget, but there are other areas that we have done well enough and exceeded the budget that I believe that we're still not going to have a problem hitting the projection that I gave you a couple of weeks ago. And the only other one that you might see that there's a big difference is the medical assistance reimbursements. This week, we're going to be working on pulling together all of the receipts for our access program for the last year. And what we have to do is we just have to pull the receipts, put a little narrative for the state of what we did for our access program, and then submit it to them. And then what they do is they'll send us money for that. So you'll see this increase. We'll get it up to where the budget is. So revenues are looking pretty good for the end of this year. It's like power outage. You're out, Josh. All right. When we switch over to the expenditures, when you look at the expenditures and you look at that bottom line, it's showing that we've only used 77% of our budget through June 7th. That might be a concern to some people, like, well, how can that possibly be that you've only used 77% of your budget? School's done now, where it is, but there are still expenditures that will happen over the next month or actually 3 months, especially in the salary and benefits. We have 6 more pays for this current year, and the teachers and the aides do get paid through the summer. So we'll see 4 payments for them in July and August. So that number that's sitting here at 74, and even with the benefits, it's sitting at 78. It's going to increase up dramatically over the next month and a half, 2 months. Also, we have some tuition that has to come in yet. Most of the charter schools have only billed up through May. June really is not going to be very much, but it's going to be coming in. A lot of the outsourced maintenance invoices will still be coming in. And we're also trying to get some of our summer program or projects done in this current year. So we're doing what we can to make sure that we come close to, where we projected. And I see that we're not going to have a problem getting to that number. And lastly, we do have some more check runs. So you say 77, yeah. If you're not aware of what's happening in the future, you're going to say somebody messed up with the budget, but we're okay.
The vast majority of that pandemic-related.
A lot of it is, yes. If you look, especially, Josh, can I hit? If you look, especially supplies, they're right now down almost $900,000. That is reflection of that, and especially the professional and technical services, where we're only at 70% of our budget right now. That too, we didn't have as much of the kids going out to the schools. We didn't have the OT, the PTs. So yes, there are definitely signs in several of these accounts where it was definitely pandemic driven. Absolutely. So as far as with the current financials, I think we're going to hit projections. I think we're definitely going to have a little bit of money left over. So it's going to be, it's a good thing that we do have that money, but kind of tying into what we're going to discuss a little bit later, we're going to have that talk of, how are we going to allocate this money so that it is used properly and most efficiently for the district. So right now, I think everything looks good. As far as next year's budget, I did not put anything on here as of yet, but that right now there's nothing that has come across the desk that has really impacted my prediction of where we're going to be for next year's budget. So as I stated during that presentation, the budget's going to be balanced. So when I come to you, you will see a balanced budget. And it's also my plans that a week before, maybe a week and a half before, we'll send out the final budget to you all so that you have time to look it over. If you have any questions, then we can bring it up on the night, when it comes for the passing of the budget. So right now, we're pretty good with that. Any concerns, questions about current or next year's budget?
So on the next year's budget that you have there,
This is this year's budget. I don't have
okay,
next year's budget up there yet. But we did make adjustments for basically what we had to do is we really took a big look at all of our big spending items and the staffing. We looked at the charter schools. We looked at the outsourced and really fine-tune those. Took out everything to make sure that that budget is right where we think it should be. So that's what we've been doing, and I still am going through and looking at different items and making sure that if I do see something that's in there that needs to be changed, I'll definitely alert you before you approve the final budget. But as the years go on, it's kind of hard being in the first year of really understanding the trends and how things flow with this district, just because every district is different. Carlington is very unique in the way, different things are done. And that's just how it is. It's the nature of the beast when it comes to schools. So as I progress through the budget process and I continue to go through the months, I'll be able to look at things and fine tune them. And my goal is that we get a budget that fits the district and allows the district to do everything that it needs to do to educate the kids. And that's really the whole goal of what I have to do. So it's a work in progress. It's always going to be something that's going to be looked at every month. We're going to get the administrators more involved in their budgets. That's something that hasn't been done quite a lot in the past. So we want this budget not to be my budget or the budget that the board passed. We want this budget to be owned by everybody. I want everyone to understand it. And that's really the most important thing, because if people understand what's in the budget and what it's for and what we're using it and how we're going to do it, then we can spend it more accurately and we can use it more efficiently. And also it can also bring up those situations where something is not working, that you're not afraid to come to us and say, hey, what if we look at this and maybe change this or do something like that. So that's where I plan on going with the budget process henceforth. All right. So now we're going to go into the financial forecast. The financial forecast, it's really an important tool to judge the financial future of the district, and it allows us to make decisions, based on not solely on these results, because I want to caution you that this is not 100% accurate picture of where the district is, where it's going, because it is a lot of assumptions that are made in this, and it's always going to be being adjusted. So if we see that there's so many variables hitting this budget, this forecast, that you have to really to do any good and for it to be valuable, you have to look at different trends and look at your percentages of increases, and that's going to get back to where I was just saying about if we can get consistent in the way that we're coding and putting things, if we're staying consistent on how we're budgeting, we budget the same amount or same increase every year for supplies, not go huge one year, low next year, then we're going to be able to keep fine tuning this so that we will get to a point where we're going to have a pretty good confidence in our assumptions. So like I said, this is going to be something that's going to be constantly looked at. If we have to add expenditures, we'll add expenditures in here. If the state does any changes with their, like what they're talking now, the charter school, the fair funding adjustments, all that impacts this forecast. So That's why I just want you, when you see the numbers I give you, I don't want you to totally panic when you see it, because these are based on assumptions. And in your packet, there's 3 summary sheets that I'll go through. And then after that, I have 2 sheets that basically shows you the line items of everything that builds up my summary for this. And I believe on the first one, which is the revenues, on the second page, you'll see our assumptions on the second page. And we are taking into account a minor increase in assessments. We're looking at a 93% collection rate that could be adjusted up or down based on what's happening in the community. So those assumptions are there on the second page. You can look at those, and then at any time, if you have any questions about it, and especially if you look at the expenditure one, it's a 3-page one. The third page of that, you're going to see pretty much the assumptions of every single line item in there. So that's all based on percentage increases. And we stay, because of me being new with the district and trying to look at the numbers, I've been very conservative. I really stayed within a 1% to 2% increase. I don't know how realistic, but I think that's a fair number to use for these. So that's the numbers for that. So we'll go through the summaries real quick. That's the first page, the color pages that I gave you. So the first one that we always like to do is, let's start with today. Once we pass the budget for this year, what's going to happen in the next 5 years if we don't raise taxes at all, based on the assumptions? So remember, all of these numbers here are based on those assumptions that I made in those other 2 sheets. So basically, you're going to see the increase in the revenues. You're going to look at your increase of expenditures. So we're going to start out with a $3.696 million fund balance. But as you see right from the start, we're losing $500,000 of our fund balance in the first year. And then it compounds each year to the point where we're going to be at the end of 5 years at minus $6 million. So really what's going to happen is we have enough fund balance, if we don't raise taxes, to survive the first 2 years. On the third year, that's when, if we don't make any changes based on this, that's the year that we're going to have that fund balance dip below 0. So that's a really important tool. I mean, I'd like to see it out there. I'd like to see it out further if it was, realistic, but at least we know that for at least a couple years, we're okay financially to be able to not worry about having to go into the negative. But it's also an eye opener to say, hey, if we want to keep out of that, we're going to have to continuously fine tune, make decisions that are going to either keep the expenditures where they are, add more revenues, so that we can maintain this budget. So this is where we would be based on the assumptions without a tax increase. Any questions, concerns, comments? 93%. 93%, right.
Is that the date that it's due, or is that after the?
No, that's just based on the whole collection. So if we take the whole year and look at what was expected and what we actually received, then that's how we come up with that collection rate. Because it'd be hard if we tried to say if we went from budget to what we actually received, that doesn't really help us. And I know what you're saying. If we try to say, based on how, periods that we're going to receive things, it's too hard to really get a good number of how much collection is during what periods of time. I mean, we can try to do that, but no, this 93 is just based on a full year, every year that we're looking at it. So that It is it's a good number. For the past couple years, the number has been a little bit lower. It's been I think been right around 91-92% collection rate. But the last 2 years, we have seen where we've exceeded our budget and the amount. So that's where we feel comfortable that we're going to be able to collect more from them. That's why we raised it, and we only raised it 93, and we can do a little bit more of a detailed in in the next couple months to see if we can fine tune it to get it to that true rate where it's at. But right now 93 is a pretty good number. I feel comfortable with it. Um, I had other people look at it. They look, it looks pretty comfortable. So yes.
Okay, on this millage rate, it's like comparing apples with oranges with different school districts.
Right.
Is there a way is there a point where a home buyer is going to say that Carleton School District, that they don't want to live in our district? Is there a millage rate that's going to break their backs?
That's really like
Especially for the people buying in.
no, you're absolutely right, and that is a very hard thing to answer because what is good for us, what our millage rate is, and what we offer that can be offered because of that millage rate might be different than a district that has more tax base that's coming in. So they're going to have more of the option to do things, and their millage rate might be lower. So I really think that the millage rate, yes, that's probably the first thing that people do look at and say, well, I'm going to pay more taxes here. But I think that if you're a homeowner and you really want to find that good school, you're going to have to really research that school itself, of not just how much it's going to cost you to go there, but what kind of programs it's offering. So that's why it's important that we maximize our tax money that we do have, because it is a smaller tax base compared to districts around us. But that also makes us unique, that we can offer things that might be value added to a family that some other district doesn't do. Hence the chill rooms. We're throwing a lot of um, our emphasis into like the mental health of looking at kids. So that could be something that it gives Carleton that added. Okay, the taxes are a little bit here, but look at what they're offering. They have these AP programs, they have the chill rooms, they have the different programs. So that's really what should drive.
It's a shame that there's not an asterisk that gives that information when
Right.
somebody is trying to buy a home here, because that's what I'm hearing over and over again. Just in a conversation this last weekend for some friends for their children to move back into our district from
Right.
Cannonsburg, and that's Washington County.
Right.
And it's like comparing apples and oranges. It's so cheap down there. And on Cubbage Hill, it's part Churches Valley School District and it's part Carnegie,
Right.
which is Carleton. And one house from the other, the same looking house, is so much cheaper. Their taxes, the
Right.
dollar amount is
Right.
so much cheaper. There should be a way for us to show to people that they are buying into higher quality here.
Right.
in our school.
And I think that is very important, that we have that where we do put out there the events that we are doing. We put out there when kids are progressing, or when we do put a new program out, say, hey, look at what we're doing with what we have, because unfortunately one of the slides I did show you, which it's a slide that it really means nothing, but when you show everybody in the whole Allegheny County, we're all different, and rates might show that, okay, we're ninth highest, but it's not apples and apples. I mean, because each different district is unique based on their size, what they offer. Some districts are willing to raise taxes more, to give a little bit more. So and unfortunately that's what people do look at. They say, okay, let's look around and say, well, they're too high, and not go any further, and that's unfortunate.
Sure. One way that some people look at it is, if you want to go and move into a neighborhood, what is a house that fits your family going to cost, and then what are the school taxes for that house? I think most people in general have found that Carlington's a very affordable district. So you can move into Carlington, get a home that is a good value for your family, and then the associated school taxes are based on the value of that home. So our millage rate might be a tiny bit higher than a neighboring district, but if they can buy a home in our district that's 20% less than another area, then their overall tax bill is going to be lower. So it is a better value for them.
It is now, but I think George does raise a good point, because if you continue raising your tax rate when your property base is not increasing, after a while, you will price yourself out. It will become a problem. It's hard to
Right.
decide when that is, but
Right. And
that is
we
something we need
right.
to monitor.
And that's something that,
Demographic changes, property base, monitor that in comparison to our escalation.
and that's something I was going to bring up just a little bit later. You're absolutely right. I mean, we're getting to that point where our expenditures are getting to that level that we're hitting that apex that it's going to start really taxing, well, I mean, it is taxing the residents, but we're out taxing ourselves. So that's right. And we have to get to that point where what is that sweet spot? And it's hard to find that sweet spot because we do have those built-in increases that we cannot control. PCERS, contracts. I mean, contracts a little bit, we can control those, but it's hard when you have those increases and you try not to raise those taxes, and you try to find that without having to sacrifice one positions, two programs. Once you start doing that and you start, then you're really distancing yourself from the other districts. When you start doing that, so that's the task that I have, Dr. Kreider has, all the administrators have. I mean, really everybody has, is that, once we find where that sweet spot is of, where, we can give the best educational programs and not have to raise taxes or continue to raise taxes high every year, then, we have to look at our programs. How can we save money? Do we want to, do some construction right now or push it out? That's things that we have to constantly be looking at, because if we get to that point where, and you'll see a scenario in a second, that if we continue to tax, it's not sustainable. It really is not sustainable.
If we look at Carlington historically, 7 or 8 years ago, we had gone 5, 6, 7 years with no tax increase.
There was, I saw that. It was amazing.
So it was only when the pension model at the state changed and every district had to adapt, and they changed their tax.
That had a lot to
try
do with
to
it.
account for it.
There were several things that happened there. That's correct. That's one of them. One was the assessment happened. So when the Allegheny assessment happened, many districts, including this one, lowered the tax rate. So right there, the tax rate went down just a little bit. I think went down 2% or 2 points. I can't remember exactly the number, but that right there is lowering, and you're almost like resetting. So now, you don't raise taxes all those years. You're using your fund balance, keep going down, down, down. And then, yes, all of a sudden something big like the pension happens. So once that happens, then you don't have that fund balance to be able to absorb that and to handle that. So that's exactly what happened.
Right.
And the change in the funding, we talked about that a couple meetings ago, that the state changed how they were funding districts based on need was really the priority for them at that point. So the amount of money that we were receiving from the state dropped. So it was almost like the perfect storm that everything, hit in that, 5-10 year period. And all of a sudden now you're not able to sustain it because you've been using your fund balance for years and years and years. Now all of a sudden, what do we got to do? The only way we can survive is by doing tax increases. And that's, you don't ever want to get to that situation, but, and it's a reality for, a lot of districts.
Right. So what this board has done over the last 10 years is we saw the pension crisis coming at us. We saw our contract obligations for our teachers. We saw what that expenditure was going to be. So we took a very proactive approach to being very careful with programs. We actually curtailed a few programs here and there. We allowed retirements to not be fulfilled, or positions that had been vacated were not filled. So we were very careful with how we did that. I think we all feel like we're at the tail end of that now. The pandemic has unintentionally given us some cost relief temporarily, which has helped us further. So now we're looking at, now we're in a pretty solid position. How do we move forward from here? Jude and a former director helped put together a 5-year plan, which you have, excellently adopted and used as a tool. Where do we move forward from here, given the work that's happened over the last 10 years?
Right.
When can we carefully freeze taxes without putting ourselves in jeopardy because of Act
Right.
1?
The problem is, Jim, that the pandemic may have helped us financially as a school district, but there's so many people unemployed, restaurant owners and restaurant workers, that we're helped by the pandemic, but so many of our residents can't afford a tax increase. Plus, so many are senior citizens.
Right. And unfortunately,
We have
that
to
is
be
that's
careful.
the biggest base in a
Yes.
lot of areas. Being a very senior area in Pittsburgh. That you're right. I mean, it's unfortunate, and never do we want to come to you and say, hey, we need to have you guys raise taxes. And I mean, it's not something that we enjoy doing. We try to do everything that we can to keep it, within the tax thing. But unfortunately, there are circumstances like what you said, the contracts, the PCERs, and honestly, all of the work that has been done over with this board over the last 4 or 5 years has given us that fund balance to be able to recover for a couple of years and say, what are we going to do? But we also have to be cautious that if, for every year that we recover, then down the road, the costs are still going up. So, every time you don't raise taxes to whatever, and, it doesn't have to be to the index. It could be, 1%, 2% or whatever each year, that money is lost for the future. It doesn't carry over. So, and, it's me being a financial person, saying that, I look at numbers, that's what it shows. But yeah, you have to look also at that human side. I mean, and we do too. And it's really hard to find that balance. It really is. But that's why this is important. It's important to be able to go through and say, maybe we are a little heavy in here. Let's look at this. Maybe we can cut something here. And that's going to be our job over the next few months and over the next few years of identifying those areas that maybe we can cut some costs and be able to bring those costs down that, they are closer to where we need them to be so that we don't have to raise taxes. We always, one thing that we always look at whenever we're doing our tax increases in our forecast is that, we would always like to see a tax increase of, even if it's 0.5% or something, because, each year, because what ultimately happens is if you don't raise taxes, then the next year you don't raise taxes, and then you don't raise taxes the third year, what happens on the fourth year? You have to raise taxes to the exceptions. So you're basically exceeding what you would have if you would have just done, tiny little increases. Nobody likes to hear that. And that's just a financial statement that I'm, say by looking at numbers. So that's where we have to work as together, as a board and, as an administrative group to say, what do we want to do? Do we want to use our fund balance, and not raise taxes one year? Do we want to do a minor tax increase every year, which still will use fund balance? Or, do we want to tax it to keep it where it is? And that's what my next two scenarios are going to show you, those examples.
So Keith, on this no tax increase forecast, to be clear that that's just the projected portion, right? Because the budget includes a tax increase this year.
Correct.
Budget,
Yeah,
right?
that's
so there's
right.
A tax
If you
increase to
right.
26.74, but then you didn't escalate at all.
Right. So if you look down at the bottom where it says millage change, so that 3.7 is where we worked this year.
To index this year.
That's to the index.
Yep.
Whereas, in the yellow, that's showing that we did no increases of taxes.
I mean, what sticks out to me on this is we have 2 years of balanced budget.
We have two.
I mean, I know it shows, $500,000 deficit, but that's 2 years out.
We have 2
And
years.
so it's likely that, over the course of the year, we're
Right.
within striking distance of a second year of balanced budget.
Right, and with this number only, with it being at 161,000, there's going to be situations that are going to happen. That's why I keep stressing that, this is going to change as things happen. We come into some new revenue, or we're able to cut some costs. We have some, let's say we have a special education child that graduated out that, was a cost to the district. There are different variables. There are so many of them. So tomorrow we could look at this, or a month from now, it could be totally different. It's all based on how we are. But this just kind of just gives us that, let's look at it like, if we don't do anything, yeah, this could happen.
Keith, can you share the assumptions you used, like on the revenue side and the cost
Yeah.
side? Was it a 1% increase or a flat line? Or
On the revenue side, let me see if I have let me get
I
that.
think you said you used the same assessment or the same millage rate, but a slight increase in assessment value.
I did. I increased the assessment value by, I believe it was 0.5% every year. And yeah, you're right. The millage rate was kept the same. And then let me see.
And then on the cost side, did you flatline costs or a 1% increase?
No. So back to the revenue. So basically what we did, when you look at the assessments were increased by 0.5% each year. Collection rate was 93% for each of the year. We anticipated an earned income increase of 1.5% each year. Delinquent collection of 2% each year. And then investments, we're still only projecting 1.25. So those are our projections for the revenues. And as far as the expenditures, if you look on page 3 of that 3-page sheet, when you go down through it, most of the top half, or the top quarter of the page, has a lot to do with the salaries and the payroll. Everyone find where I'm at? That's okay. There it is. That's it. That's it. Yeah, those numbers are there, and then the third. Okay, I'm sorry. So if you look at the top section of the expenditures, if you're looking at like the admin salaries, we're at 2.5%, professional salaries, and you see where we have the percentage increases based on either where the contracts are, where we think the contracts are going to be. You're looking at the medical increases of 3 to 3.5%. That's where they've historically have been over the years. Dental, same thing. And then if you see like the payroll tax, that's just a normal payroll tax. That's your Social Security, Medicare, workers' comp. And you also see that PCERS increases right above the other increases. I have adjusted that cost too. So that's all built in. So those are all based on historical or actual numbers, based on contracts, based on PCER schedules, medical history. So those numbers were more accurate than, whereas the other ones, if you look down, starting with tax collection services on down, 1 to 3% is where we're going. And those that are at 3%, I did look at kind of, there's many columns that I've blacked out just so it gets on here. So it fits on here to get a historical of kind of where we are. And I went a little bit lower than what the average should be, just so that we can see if the numbers were inflated in the previous years or not. So that's how I came up with these assumptions. And this is my first attempt of looking at this with this district. So we're going to continue to work on this. I mean, this is a very important part of the budget process, and and really for the sustainability of the district, because I don't ever want to get to that situation where I allow us not to raise taxes for years and years and years, and then all of a sudden here comes year 3 and I say to you, oh, guess what, our fund balance is in the negative, and you're going to say, well, where'd that come from? So that's where it's important that you understand that decisions that we make is looking out, not just at that next year. We have to look out to the future. So So that's where the assumptions are coming from. And like I said, those assumptions being the first time of really looking at them, they'll get fine tuned and we'll get them more accurate as the time goes on, the years go on.
And Keith, I think you said part of the challenge of working with some of the assumptions were some of the coding issues that you cleared up also.
Right.
In some cases, being able to take a look at the historical revenues and expenditures, both, having them coded in an area that we know is correct now, and being able to use that to forecast and be able to look back
Right.
historically now, I think will also
And,
help with the
and you're
assumptions.
absolutely right. That's probably the most important thing is that things are coded correctly and consistently year to year, because if you do see that in flux in 1 year of a expenditure and you don't look into it and say, well, why, if it's traditionally been at this level, why is it up here? And try to find that, then it comes back to here. Bottom line, it doesn't matter for the big picture because expenditures are expenditures, but for this purpose alone, we have to have that consistency and we have to have it correct so that we can identify where those problems are, if there are any problems. And right now, I mean, the district's really in fairly good shape so that we're able to have that time that we can really fine tune different areas and strengthen it, more than what we have already. So I think the board and the past administration, business managers and everything, they've done a great job of getting the district to where they are, where um, I hate to bring up other districts that I've been at, but it's been a struggle. We've seen that other side where we're trying to dig out of a hole, which is so much harder than trying to maintain that level of where you are.
So Keith, what are you trying to show, or what's the message or the story you're trying to share with
The
this
message
chart?
I'm trying to share with this is just basically is that if we just stay complacent, don't do anything, we don't look at anything, we don't even consider looking at raising taxes, then we're going to have a problem a couple years down the road. And then it's just going to compound. So that, I believe that's where it is. It's more of a let's see, what we need to do in the future, where we need to be, because that's the reality. Whether my assumptions are right or wrong, I mean, my assumptions could be off a little bit and it could be worse. So that's at least allowing you to know as a board where I'm coming at when I say, hey, I think we really need to raise taxes to the index, or we need to go to the exceptions. And so in the back of your head, you can think, oh yeah, if I do this now, or if I come to you and say, let's just raise taxes, 1% or 0.5%, which really might only be dollars to the taxpayer, but still it's money that the district has that can carry on year to year. So that's really what I want you to see. And, this is probably more than the other two scenarios that I did. This is probably the more important one, because that is, if we are complacent, we don't do anything, we don't change anything, everything stays status quo, where are we going to be?
So that's the first page is the
That's the tax,
No tax
no
increase
taxes.
at
So the
all.
next one, if you go ahead and switch it, Josh. What I did here was just said, okay, what if we just raised taxes a little bit and still used our fund balance? How would we look? Just to give you another scenario of kind of what I was saying, where let's do a little bit of increase. So I just basically did a 2.3% increase. That what it does is, as you see that, in 22, 23, we're still going to be using $182,000 worth of our fund balance, but we are raising taxes. But you go out, the 5 years, yeah, we're going to have a fund balance. But when you're sitting with only $62,000 in your fund balance, you know what's going to happen the following year. That's going to get to that scenario where I'm telling you that we might have to jump it up higher just to try to survive that 6th year. So this is just an example, just to say that if we threw some on, or let's say that we don't raise taxes next year, then the percentages in the years following might have to be a little bit higher to try to recover from that. So that's what I was saying, is that we need to, as a a board and an administrative group is to say, where do we want to be? What do we want to do? Are we worried about 5 years down the road of having a set amount of fund balance? And then that's really kind of what, we were talking with Jude about with his model and everything, is saying, what is that fund balance level that we should be at and maintain and try to hit using fund balance tax increases. So if you're looking at this and you're saying, okay, well, we're raising taxes 2.3%, but we're still using our fund balance, it's kind of, it's a double-edged sword, because we are getting that money, but we're still using up our fund balance to go on there. So that's kind of what I was just trying to show you for that. And then I don't have on the PowerPoint. I did this just a couple of minutes ago, or before the meeting. I said, what is it going to take to get us to where we are, where our fund balance doesn't change at all? So that's the third scenario I just threw in there, just to show you what it would take to maintain. And basically, if you look at it, we're looking at 3.4, 3.5, 3.6, 3.6, 3.6. So you're hitting the index pretty much every single year, and you're raising your taxes 5 points. It's not sustainable. It really isn't. So that's just another scenario that says, if you come to me and said, let's do whatever we can do to keep our fund balance at that 3.6, 3.7%, 3.7 million, that's what it's going to take. So that's all these scenarios are. The first one is the most important one, just to kind of give you that idea that if we stay status quo, this is what's going to happen.
So then that takes us to the work that Joe and the committee are doing with the contract negotiations.
Yeah. I mean, that really is, it's a big part of it. It really is. And, in a district this size, every decision that is made, every contract that is done has a huge impact on the budget. So yes, I mean, whatever we can do to maintain and to be able to use the tax money without having to cut staff, cut programs, cut athletics, cut music, anything, that it's a win for the district. It really is. And it's saying that we're all doing, our job. But we also have to, it's my job to always be that other side to say, you don't want to raise taxes next year, but I think that we really need to, based on what I'm seeing in these numbers. So there's going to be times where we're going to definitely disagree, but that's you. You guys are the ones. You were the that chose to make those hard decisions. We're just here to give you enough information to be able to make those decisions, and the correct ones, or whatever you feel is the best. So that's basically everything with the projections. I mean, it's, I know we covered a lot, but I think it's that important that we really look at it. And, I think it's important that, we don't just put this away and say, okay, next June we'll look at it. I think it's something that we need to bring up at least, if not quarterly or every 6 months, so that we can kind of say, okay, here we are, this is what we're looking at. These are things that have changed, just so that, who knows, it might go better. We might get that fair funding and we get some more money, or, we are able to get a contract a little bit lower than what our projections are. So, that's where we are with this. Anything else before we move on? No. All right. Next thing that we're going to look at is the capital projects planning. I believe I have that sheet in there for you. Is there anybody on? No? Okay. This is actually, it's too big to put on a PowerPoint, so and it's easier for you to look at because it is small. So basically what this is our 5-year plan for capital projects. I sat down with Dennis and he made a list of things that need to be done for the district over the next 5 years. And basically what we do is you take the list, assign some cost to it, and say, what's the priority? When does it need to be done? Is it high priority? It has to be done next year, or the early the year after? Is it medium priority? We can push it out, or low priority. So what this spreadsheet that I've built does is it breaks down everything that we have. So if you look at the grand total in that first column, we have $6.5 million worth of projects that need to be done. Um, Not all of them have to be done, but it's just it's like a wish list. I tell Dennis, this is his Christmas list. He lists it all up. This is what he wants to get done. And then that's where we have to say, when can we do these projects? Are they really necessary? And prioritize them every year whenever we do our budget. So if you look at the first year, the fiscal year 22, the way this spreadsheet works is all the fiscal year ones, the fiscal year 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, those are all of the expenditures based on the priority of when things need to be done. Some of the big ticket items like the tile replacements, we've spread out over several years just to try to lower the cost. But those columns there, those are, if we were to do everything there, that is what the district would be responsible for paying for out of the general fund budget. So right now in 22, we only have $50,000 budgeted for capital projects. And you see it's like this, we have 35,000 for sidewalks. We have a Wi-Fi upgrade. We also have the playground and craft and repairs. And if you look at that down at the bottom, it says below the grand total, it says fiscal year 21-22 budget, administrator budgets, and then you have your transfers to capital reserve, and then you have your total budget. So what that's basically saying is you're going to see that that's what I actually budgeted in the following year for the expenditures above. So if those expenditures, as you see, our expenditures right now, we're anticipating them being $49,200. We have $800 extra left there to and some other little, I mean, 800 is not a lot, but it's just, there's 800 in there. So what we're trying to do is we have to figure out where are we going to place all of this money to pay for it. So we have options, and those options are on the right-hand side. You have your capital reserve. We have a bond fund if we need to use more debt. And in this year and the next 3 years, we have the ESSERS money. So now we're going to be able to, and the goal is every year as we look at this 5-year plan and do our budgeting for the following year, is to move things out of this fiscal and over into the capital reserve or into the ESSERS. And the way that's going to be completed is we have to start looking at continuing that transfer to the capital reserve every year. Ideally, if you had enough money that you can budget enough to cover your expenditures for every year for the capital projects, that's what you're going to want to do. But what I did is in our projections, I did project $150,000 every year going into capital projects. So basically, right now, there is $700,000 in our capital reserve. So we can move 700,000 of these expenditures in the middle here over there to capital reserve, and the ESSERS we can move more over there. So this is just a preliminary. We just started looking at this. Now it's time for us to sit down and say, okay, what is the best way to one, pay for it without using the general fund, and try to move as much as we can into the capital reserve or the ESSERS, or and two, really look at the priority and say, can we do this year or can we not? And that's where, we can have that discussion every year before the budget comes out and say, all right, here's what we have for this year. Are you in agreement with that? Or is there other things that you feel as a priority? Because it should be something that, we need to discuss as a group. We're going to tell you what needs to be done. We're going to tell you where we think it should be done. But then that's going to be a situation where if I need, 22, 23, I would need 301,000. That's the grand total for the projects without moving anything. So if I said to you, we need to do $301,000 of repairs, it might cost us to raise taxes a little bit to do that. You might look at this and say, well, some of these aren't really that, we can push them off to another year. The good thing about this is it's a roadmap. It allows us to see what needs to be done, so things are not left undone, especially the concrete, the parking lots. And the big ticket item is really the roof. The roof here needs to be replaced. So the ideal thing is that we don't add debt. I mean, the ideal thing is that if we can work this through with the ESSER's money and the money that we have in the capital reserve, that we can move some expenditures into those so that it will free up some money that we can put more money into the capital projects to be able to pay for that. That's the ideal thing. We're very low with our debt load right now as a district. It's not going to do us any good really to raise the tax or raise our debt load, but it's there. It's an available tool for us if something happens. So just that's basically the capital projects. And really what this is just showing is that if we didn't transfer anything over to capital reserve, if we didn't do anything of moving money, and last year was the first year in a while that money was moved over, it should be something that we try to build into our budget every year so that we can do more of these projects out of that and not have it in the general fund budget where we can focus that money on the kids and the teachers and everything. So that's basically what that is. And then, as I said, the ESSERs will be offset by any allowable costs. Any questions on this? I know this was quick, but this could be really a topic on its own that we can discuss sometime, or as a group, whatever we decide to do with it.
I don't have questions. I do think it's great. I mean, one of the infrastructure is one of our biggest liabilities right now. Just the massive quantity of work that has to be done. So, I mean, I feel like this gives us a road or pathway to get to a point where we've got a predictable, like every year we know we can set aside 1 to 2% of our total budget for capital projects.
Right.
We can't do that right now,
Right.
based on the numbers you see here. But I think between ESSERs and some other things, we have a path forward.
We have a path, and that's the key, is to identify that so that something doesn't go unnoticed, and then all of a sudden you do have a collapse of a roof, God forbid, and then you immediately have to go out and try to figure out how you're going to pay for that. So if you use a little bit of doing the preventive maintenance, and get yourself into that cycle of doing things through getting that ability to put aside money for the capital reserve, then yeah, absolutely, you're better off.
One of the expenditures here is $150,000 for Carnegie Auditorium seating. Our principal had a great idea. The building was built for adult size students because it was a high school. She would prefer that the seats be taken out completely and put in carpeting, which would be much cheaper. And she says that this would be less of a discipline problem because the kids, some things are being hidden because the little people are hiding in their big seats. So officially, I would like to say, let's consider carpeting instead of putting in new seats.
Then we'd really never be able to use it for anything that had parents, attendants, and things like that.
She said there's only 2 times a year that adults use that auditorium. And she said we could just use for those. It could be that in 1 week, set up the seating for 2 end of year adult and parent gatherings in the auditorium with just putting up seats, temporary seats.
And that's the point of this again. I mean, it's something that we'll work with administration, see get the priorities and say this needs to be done. Look at the ideas that they have, and absolutely, then we fine tune it, come to you and say, okay, this is what's going to happen. And you might have those kind of questions, and that's the point of bringing it to you, to say, well, what about this? What about this? That's what we want to try to do, because I mean, it's really important to be transparent, and we don't ever want to not show you every avenue of everything just because you're the ones as the board that have to talk to the residents and explain why things are done the way they are, and they can come to the meetings and question, but doesn't seem like they seem to come too often to the meetings. So, but that's what, I'm big about, giving you the information, letting you decide how you want to move forward with it, and then we move forward. But it's a collaboration of everybody. And I'm not just, it's not just the administrators. I mean, it's even the teachers and all the way down to the custodians. Everybody has, good inputs, and we take everything seriously. We look at everything. So that's just, another one of those big tools. It's a good tool because we're going to make decisions on raising taxes if we say, yes, these have to get done. I mean, it's just one of those resources that we have. And it's something too that constantly is going to be changed. This is going to be something that's going to be Dennis's for the next year. He's going to work this, and then his replacement, or if we can talk him into staying for 5 more years with us, then he will keep continuing. He's ignoring me, so yeah, that's our. Yeah, we're gonna stay. All right, so. Oh, and capital reserve funds. You can read it. I'm not going to read it. You can look at it. It just basically is saying that what the capital reserve funds can be used for, and the biggest thing is that if we move money into the capital reserve, we cannot move it back. So that's why it's a really important decision when we decide to move things over. And then finally, 10 minutes are up. Back up one. We're going to. The ESSERS, really quickly, the ESSERS is upon us, has been upon us, and it's time for us to really start making decisions. And we're going to start having meetings in the next couple weeks to go over it. I just wanted to show you here. These are just the main topics of where we can spend the money. There's so many subheadings to each one of them. We can be here for a couple days and go through them all. But I just wanted to say that the ESSERS is there. We're going to look at the best way of using it to one, get things done that we need, capital projects especially. Help with the summer school is a good example. We're going to fund the summer school this year 100% with the ESSERS. So it's going to give us opportunities to use it. So I believe that, is it next meeting you want to, or the August meeting, I think we're going to talk, or when did you about the ESSERS grant, where we're going to be?
Use it. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I don't want to go too much into the ESSERS. I just wanted you to know that we all know that it's there. It's just that we have to just figure out, and there is going to be some involvement. It's required. I believe, is it for the ESSERS 3, Dr. Kreider, that we have to have a public.
ESSERS 3, we have to get a committee of stakeholders together, board members, community members.
Right. So that's forthcoming. So all of this is going to start moving, and it's a lot of money, but this is our opportunity to get it, things done that need to be done, and help the kids. So that's everything I have. I know it was more than 10 minutes. Sorry, Dennis. Any other questions, concerns, comments?
Quick note. I love the list, the capital list. It's very helpful. I have a couple of tactical questions for a future meeting.
Okay.
Not for tonight, but just it's a good list. So
Okay,
thanks for
good.
putting it together.
And that's exactly. I mean, anytime that we want to go through anything, if there's a topic, just let us know, and we'll go over it. But yes, I'd like to try to go to the board with the capital projects at least twice a year. Once at the middle, just to say these are items that have been completed off of our list, and then when you come, I believe it's usually about May, I'd like to come to you and say, all right, we're in the process of budgeting. Let's look at what we have for next year, and how much are you willing to absorb? And we will. And the list is going to continue to, we'll keep it going. Yep. Yeah, I found this was a really good tool that I've used in the past. It really does help out. Anything else? All right, that's my report. Thanks.
Okay, that's the only administrative report we had on the docket for tonight.
Any last follow-up questions from any board members? Nope.
Motion to adjourn? Seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. We are adjourned.